Hi everyone, Ed Bixby here from Spotlight Now, and today I'm here with Andy Armantrout. Andy is the owner and creator of Old West Casket. He crafts locally sourced funeral products in Washington's scenic Selkirk Mountains. Andy's interest in woodworking sprouted early in life, building tree forts, rafts, and go-karts as a child. After wearing many hats as an Alaskan fisherman, an oil patch worker, an engineer, a salesman, and a farmer, Andy opened his shop in 2015. Andy became fascinated with casket making after watching an episode of Little House on the Prairie, which featured a wooden casket made with no nails or screws. In 2020, after his father's passing, Andy bought an Irish casket and became interested in making green funeral products. Inspired by the work of Pa Joe, who crafts fantasy caskets in Ghana, Andy hopes to bring custom, eco-friendly fantasy caskets and products to the green burial community. So, welcome, Andy.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Ed. That was a pretty good introduction.
My pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here, Andy. And why don't we get started by learning about how you got into woodworking and what inspired you to craft the eco-friendly funeral products in particular? So we have a little bit of that backdrop, but
Yeah.
how did all this start to happen?
Well, I've always been interested in woodworking. When I was a kid, like I said, you know, um, every kid that I grew up with, we were always building forts, and we would swipe our parents' tools and go to the wood shops, workshops, whatever, and we would grab a hammer, nails, screws. We didn't know what we were doing, but we wanted to build something, and so a lot of times it'd be, oh, you'd see a tree fort up in the air and you'd be like, oh my, as an adult, I look at it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, how'd those kids not kill themselves? But, it was something to do. It kept us, kept us busy. Nowadays, everybody's playing with their little cell phones um, and we were outdoors all the time. Um, our parents never knew where we were at until streetlights came on. Then we came home. And so growing up, I was always building stuff and trying to figure out how things worked and uh, did all that. And then about junior high is when I took my first woodworking class. And so that was the real early 80s. And I remember we built these trivets. It was something that mom could put her hot pot on the counter or something like that. And we took the whole class and everybody did a certain part of it. And so it just kind of got me interested. And so over the years, all through high school, I took woodworking. I had a really good teacher. He was the type of guy who believed in, before throwing us on a saw or something, a table saw or a bandsaw or whatever. He wanted us to learn how to do things the old-fashioned way. And so we were hand cut, learning how to hand cut dovetail joints and that kind of stuff. And after a while, he's like, "Okay, you learned enough. Okay, let's do it the modern way." But I never forgot a lot of that stuff. In fact, it was funny because when I opened up my shop, uh, immediately I'm looking at my tools and I'm like, I inherited all these different tools from well, I had my own tools and had my dad's tools, had my grandfather's tools, had my uncle's tools, and so I've got two or three of the same tools, and so a lot of them were woodworking tools. And I remember looking at this stuff going, yeah, they don't use this stuff anymore, but I know how to use it. And so what I what I've done is um, I've tried to build things in a manner in which um, are simple, but yet they look nice. And I'm the kind of guy who's always believed in trying to utilize everything, from the tip of the pig to the tail, And so for me, I would see people throwing all this stuff out. And in Alaska, one of the places I lived, we this they don't call them counties up there, but anyway, they had a certain specific area that they called the reuse area where everybody would go throw their garbage, but they set a certain side off to it. And if you want to get rid of a couch or whatever else, you just kind of threw it there, and then someone would say, "Hey, that looks nicer than what I have." So you grab it and put their couch back. And so I got in this habit of looking around, and if I found something that was better than what I had, I grabbed it. And so over the years, people know that about me. And so when I set up my shop here, I had people calling me up or saying, hey, they'd stop by my place, say, Andy, I've got all this lumber. Do you want it? I'd be like, sure, I'll take it. And um, and like recently, I brought one of my boards that um, I don't know if you can see it, but anyway, this guy that I know, he brought me all this beautiful wood that they're tearing a house down right now, and it's all this beautiful wood. And he goes, Andy, can you use it? And I said, sure, I'll take it. And so then I was like, okay, so here's an urn I just built out of that same exact wood. I don't know if you can see it very well,
Yeah, we can see it.
but
Beautiful.
and so I take something that's, like this, and then I build an urn, or I build a casket or a coffin or something like that. And so for me, just to throw it away or burn it or whatever else, it really kind of bugs me. And see, this guy that brought this wood to me last week or 2 weeks ago, he's working on this site, and they're just throwing all this stuff in the dumpster and burning it. You know, they're they don't have any use for it. And he's like, he knew that I would use it. And so part of the way I look at the green industry is utilizing these materials. Because like when 2020, when my dad died, okay, I live in Washington State, okay, so did my dad, but he always wanted to be buried in Indiana. And so that's where the family came from. And so it was right in the heat of COVID, and so it was very difficult. Well, I went online and I knew dad liked old barnwood. He loved barnwood. Okay. And so what I did was I went online and I started looking for caskets and that kind of stuff. And I found this Amish group that built caskets out of barn boards. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, we're reutilizing barnwood and they're making caskets out of it. And when I finally got back to Indiana to do the funeral and all that, saw the casket, and everybody was just amazed at the quality of the construction. They were looking at it was old oak. It had that patina to it that you can't replicate unless it's out there for over 100 years in the wind and rain and everything else. And it looked really nice. Well, here I'm going, we're going to take this beautiful wood and then we're just going to bury it. And then on top of that, I'm sitting with the funeral director and he's like, okay, now you guys need to get burial vault. And I'm like, why? And he goes, well, so the lawnmowers won't fall through, as the casting degrades and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. And so he goes, well, I've got this really cheap one that's made out of plastic. And then I've got the concrete and the steel and all the other stuff. And so I'm like, okay, well, is this required? He goes, yeah, it's a state law. I said, okay, well, let's do it. And so we put dad in the burial vault, closed the grave, all that other stuff. Went back east, or I went back west after I met with the guy who built the coffin or casket. And I remember just sitting there going, all this beautiful lumber, instead of making it into furniture or whatever else, or urns or whatever that people can see, it's in the ground. No one's going to see it. And so for me, when I see this kind of stuff going on, I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And so I remember back when I was a child, and I remember that Little House on the Prairie episode where the Jewish carpenter, he's making his own casket and he's not using any metal, any glues. Well, he might have been using horsehide glue. I don't know. But, dowels and all that kind of joinery. And it's like, it's a beautiful piece, but yet when it finally does degrade and break down, it will go back to the earth with nothing that's going to, you know, uh, be um, harmful, say. And
Right.
so the green burial thing um, really fascinates me because, like, I know in the Jewish world and the Muslim world and even the Native American world, they try to go with these products that are all natural or not even use these products. And so the customer, it comes down to what are their values? You know, do they are they okay with screws in something, or are they okay with glue? You know, or they just want joinery? And so the green burial um, industry, you know, it's still kind of in an infancy, but yet it's not, because we got away from the way things were done in the past that were a lot more friendly than what we have nowadays with the burial vaults, steel caskets, and all this other stuff. And so that's kind of where I'm going. Um, you know, I listen to customers, I talk with them, and I try to utilize materials that normally just get thrown away, as opposed to, you know, cutting a brand new tree down, for example. So that's kind of where I'm going. Does that
No,
make sense, Ed?
absolutely. No, it makes all the sense in the world. And the funny thing is, Andy, that you know, like you said earlier in the conversation, unfortunately, we live in this technological world. And with that being said, people have kind of lost touch with who we are and where we
Yeah.
came from. So, simplicity, tradition, beauty, those are the things you're
Yes.
conveying with your product, and also usefulness, like you mentioned, prior to modern times, people reused different building materials all the time because they were like a precious commodity. They were not
Yep.
something to be thrown away, or they weren't disposable. So what
Yep.
I think I appreciate about what you're saying is that every particular product that you're offering essentially is an expression of who the person was.
Yep.
It is this one of a kind, beautiful vessel, whether it be for a burial or for a birdhouse or for an urn. And yeah, I commend you for what you're doing. And it's kind of the essence of what we do with the natural burial itself, believe it or not. It's the
Yeah.
expressionism. It's about creating something for an individual that tells the story of who they were or are. But with that being said, so if someone were to come to you, particularly for the Old West casket,
Yeah.
what does your building process entail? Meaning that, like, do you have any that are readily available, or do you typically make custom for people who are looking to the future, let's say?
Well, the way I look at, or the way I kind of do things, is I do have small amounts of inventory, and it's usually like my urns, you know.
Right.
Um, and so, because I also do pets, okay, that's I find it, believe it or not, it's easier to get in the pet market than it is the human market. And
Right.
so, when people either come to me now locally, I have an agreement with the local funeral home that, you know, I'm in a very small town, one of the poorest counties in the state of Washington, and we work together. And so when it comes to, like, if a local person comes to me, I say, please go talk to the funeral home and sit down with them. And then they sit down and they talk to them. Anyone from outside the area, let's say, for example, I get someone from California calling me. I talk to them. I learn about who they were. That's the beauty of, like, the um, the guy in Ghana that's building the fantasy caskets. He learns who the person was. Okay, were they a bird watcher? Were they into off-road vehicles, or what were they interested in? And so then, if there's a pre-planning, say, okay, let's build you this. You know, would you be interested in something like that? And then they go through the whole process of, okay, this is what I like, these are my hobbies, this is all that. And so they come to me and say, all right, well, this is what I want to do. And then I come up with whether A, I can do it. Okay, because some of the stuff, especially on the green stuff, some stuff you can't do. You know, they might want some intricate thing that's going to require bondo, you know, car bondo, and then paints and all. Well, then it goes out of the green world. But on if they want that, well, then we're not doing green. But if they want something green, then there's some limitations, you know. Um, and so they come to me and say, okay, this is what I want, and this is what I want to do. And I say, okay, yeah, let's talk about this. And then with their values, where are they at? Are they okay with the glue? Or are they, for example, we have hide glues out there, but they might not be kosher. Okay. And so the person will be like, no, it's not going to be kosher. And, yeah, you can drill the holes in the bottom of the casket so that way you get the dirt and it disintegrates quicker. But yet the glue won't be kosher, but they'll be okay with a non-kosher glue, or nails, which iron ore, it's a nail. It goes back into the ground. And so it really comes down to what are their values. And that's part of what I see the modern funeral industry avoids is they don't get to know really deep down who the person was. And I went on a tour of a green burial area in Spokane, and it was fascinating. It was the first one I'd ever been to, modern, we'll call it. And instead of them just rows and rows and rows and rows, it was like, okay, well, this guy wanted to be buried under this tree because it reminded me of his tree as a child or something like that. And that's part of the beauty of the green burial movement. It's like they really listen to who the individual was or their families. But my type of stuff, it's not, no, you're not going to call me on a Friday and get it by Monday. Yeah, maybe, but it's going to cost you extra. And then if the person dies, it's like it's not an immediate thing. It's old skill workmanship. It's not, you can't rush that. It's not like I have a factory here. My shop is 16 by 30, and so you're not going to get some of the big production equipment in here like you'd see at a commercial casket manufacturer that does them, one per minute, type deal.
Right. No, absolutely. And I totally understand. I think what we're speaking of here, and to the audience itself, is that there's different shades of green, and certain things are more acceptable to others than to
Yep.
other people may not accept it. And that's
Yep.
what the Global Green Burial Alliance is all about, is honoring, people and their wishes, and whatever shade of green they may be. And
Yep.
and you are 100% correct, in the sense that in the modern funeral industry, we've lost touch with the identity of the person that they're caring for. So, I think it's really a special thing that you're doing. And I think if people have the ability to prearrange and have the
Yep.
foresight to say, these are the things that I would like to have, then they can accomplish and have something, a creation that you would be able, or others could create for them. I mean, it's a great vision, and it really is the definition of a natural burial, the celebration of a life that was lived. And I
Yes.
think you kind of came in here sideways, probably very similar to me, in the sense that not everyone who believes in what we do, let's say, are textbook environmentalists. We're people, and of course,
Yep.
at the end of the day, who wouldn't believe in conservation, or environmental issues?
Yep.
Of course we do. So yeah, again, I think it's a wonderful service that you're providing, and really a wonderful message, because I'm sure, Andy, there's many people very similar to you that probably would feel the same way and don't realize that they have an outlet like this. And we come to a part of our show that I really enjoy. I like to ask, where you might want to see your business or this movement be in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, because it sounds to me like you enjoy what you do, that it's something that you get pleasure in doing. So, like, in the perfect world, where would you like to see, what you're doing personally, and the funeral industry, or the movement be in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's actually a great question, Ed. That's part of the reason that I joined the group. It's like, okay, I know I'm never going to get very big. Okay. And I don't want to get big. I just want to be able to provide for my family. I want to be able to, get some food on the table, and, pay bills or whatever. but yet there's this connection that I have with individuals. Some people will say, some people here locally will say, Andy, no, he's not an environmentalist. It's like, no, but everybody has their shade of green. It's like you said. And so where I see things in 5 years, it's like how I kind of got into this was I built this gorgeous old west, old fashioned coffin. It had horseshoe handles, actual horseshoes. It had a poker table underneath the lid. It had a gun rack inside the thing. It was like old circle sawn wood because that's where I get my lumber. I get it from a local mill. He gets all the logs that no one will mill because they're too big, you know? And so I got all my lumber from him. I built this thing. I signed up to go to the local Undertaker convention, I guess you'd call it. And they were having a big to do in Spokane. And all these guys from all over Washington State, I got some old whiskey barrels. I put them on top. I put them out on the floor. I put the coffin right on top. And people were walking by and they were like, that is absolutely cool. And it's gorgeous. I said, okay, buy it, sign, let's do some business. Well, then I found out, and I didn't know this before I went to the thing, is the larger manufacturers have such a stronghold on all the little independent funeral homes. They they've got people convinced that if you buy something from me, they're going to fall out the bottom, during the funeral. And it's actually rather insulting that they would, people would imply that. Yeah, it happens, I'm sure. But it depends on who you have building this thing. And so where I see the business in 5 years, and that's what pushed me towards the green as opposed to conventional, because it's like, wait a second here, this doesn't make sense. And so where I see the green funeral industry is you're going to see, I met with the people over in Seattle that do the composting, you know, wonderful
Right.
people and great ideas. They're going to need planners, you know, Uncle Uncle Willie dies. They've got his, compost, and they might want a planter to put his stuff in and then grow flowers or something. And so I see the industry getting larger because we have the largest generation in their upper ages now, the baby boomers. And a lot of those people, you know, they're part of the environmental movement. That's how we got Earth Day, 1970. That group of people were like, hey, we need to save the earth. And so
Right.
I see things in the future going in West Coast versus East Coast. East Coast, they bury more people than out on the West Coast. Most people on the West Coast are cremated. And I honestly, truly feel when they start finding out the other options, whether it be green burial, whether it be composting, was it acclimation or something they call it?
Yes. Yes.
All those other things, as people learn more about this, they're going to see, hey, I've got lots of options here. It's like going to a car lot, you got all the different colors of cars, and it's like, well, I don't have to have a red one. I can get a blue one, you know? And so where I see the industry is going more towards that, especially with the younger generation. Uh, so for myself, like I said, I know I'm never going to get big, but I want to be able to give those options to those people who might want a red car, who might want a blue car. What do they want? Who are the individuals? And so that's kind of how I see the industry going. I really do.
Absolutely, that's a wonderful vision. And I'm glad I asked you that question because that really, I do agree with you, Andy. I mean, it's about freedom of choice, and the consumer now is more aware and more willing to talk about these things. And you're absolutely correct. At the end of the day, no matter how you live your life, you can't disagree with the fact that, simplicity, going back to nature as you've come from nature, really
Yes.
makes the most sense. So, I mean, you're doing wonderful work. We appreciate the fact that you were willing to do a spotlight with us.
Yeah.
We really, we want you as a visionary, you may not realize this, but you are a visionary. We want you to inspire others, and you will, because it really just comes down to basics. And viewers can learn more by visiting Made in the Selkirks
Yep.
.com
Yep.
and check out Andy's work, support the work that he does, and we will continue to grow. So thank you, Andy. The Global Green Burial Alliance really appreciates your participation.
Hey, thank you very much, Ed. And I usually, this is a first, kind of a first for me with the video thing. Usually have a face for radio, but um, yeah, if anyone has any questions, yeah, don't hesitate to send me an email, Andy at maidenselkirks.com, or uh, my phone number, whatever you guys need. I'm more than happy to help, not only with the council, but also with the individuals too. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Ed.
You're very welcome, Andy. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at the next Spotlight Now.